It's been a rough few years for Huawei, but they're back in 2022 with the first P-series flagship in what seems like an eternity. This is the Huawei P50 Pro, the successor to the P40 Pro, which landed all the way back in the darkest depths of March 2020. Like the P40, it's focused on photography, with some genuinely fantastic cameras and processing tricks. And once again, there's still no Google software. However, unlike the P40, there are some technical trade-offs this time around because of the unique situation Huawei finds itself in with US sanctions. So first off, this is a 4G phone. It runs the 4G version of Qualcomm's Snapdragon 888. That's because of the restrictions preventing Huawei from producing its own 5G chipsets. Not a huge deal there in my opinion. I'll be the first to tell you how overhyped 5G has generally been, but still, it's less future-proof in that respect compared to most flagships you'll buy today. Elsewhere though, there's a solid list of specs that includes a fantastically smooth 120Hz display, a curved panel at Full HD Plus resolution, along with conveniences like in-screen fingerprint, IP68 water resistance, and ample storage and RAM. While the screen resolution is that bit lower than a lot of flagships, it's not something you're particularly going to notice, especially with this screen's excellent daylight visibility and bright, vibrant colors. And with a 6.6-inch diagonal, it's large enough for comfortable app use without being unwieldy in the hand. The basic design hasn't changed a whole lot from the P30 and the P40, at least on the front and the sides. Same squared off top and bottom edges and svelte sidewalls, plus that stylized red accented power button for a little bit of extra flair. And on the top and bottom borders, you've also got your stereo speakers, which produce ample loudness and bass without distortion. Around the back is where you'll see what really sets this phone apart, with this unique double camera ring design and Leica branding. In this black color, the back panel is a little dull looking compared to the more ostentatious gold and pink options that are available, but still those twin camera bumps very clearly tell you this phone is all about photography. The main attraction is a gigantic 50 megapixel main camera that's paired with a monochrome sensor at 40 megapixels to capture extra fine detail. There's also a 13 megapixel ultrawide and 64 megapixel telephoto that's a folded periscope lens at 3.5 times zoom. Huawei was one of the first brands to do periscope telephoto with 5 times lenses in the P30 Pro and P40 Pro, so the move back down to 3.5 times zoom is a little perplexing, but the higher 64 megapixel resolution is designed to compensate for that. This camera system continues the Huawei legacy of excellent dynamic range and low light performance, especially with that main shooter. Even in very challenging backlit situations, the main camera captures a ton of detail, producing 12.5 megapixel shots from that 50 megapixel sensor. The 13 megapixel ultrawide also holds its own really well, offering a more unique field of view with similarly great dynamic range. Mostly, these cameras are really competitive with the Google Pixel 6 Pro, which is one of the best Android cameras out there right now. I've also been really impressed by the selfie camera, which defaults to a sort of middle zoom level of 0.8 times, and from there lets you zoom in or out. The maximum wideness, if you like, of 0.6 times gives you a really wide and dramatic perspective, and that same excellent dynamic range applies to this camera as well. The telephoto is where things get a bit more interesting. The 3.5 times zoom level is lower than its predecessors, but arguably is a bit more useful at certain zoom levels when combined with the hybrid zoom potential that you get from a high-res 64 megapixel sensor. Like the Pixel 6 Pro, your useful hybrid zoom range goes up to about 10 times. Though it's worth saying that Huawei's 10 times gives you a slightly tighter shot than the Google camera does, it's equivalent to around 11 or 12 times on the Pixel. The amount of sharp, fine detail you can still capture at 10 times is impressive, in some situations even slightly outperforming the Pixel. But I also noticed that the P50 Pro's telephoto was more susceptible to fine detail being smushed out of shots in some situations because of hand motion. Google and Samsung's telephotos are a bit more consistent in that respect. And obviously it can't match the zoom potential of Samsung's top camera phone with its dedicated 10 times lens at zoom levels of 20 times or above. In low light though, I've been seriously impressed by the main camera's capabilities even outside of the dedicated night mode. In fact, if anything, night mode on this phone is overkill in a lot of situations, pulling out excessively saturated colors in a lot of darker scenes, giving a bit of an unnatural look. This was something I noticed across all 3 cameras in certain situations, most notably sunrises and sunsets, where it's clear the phone's cranking up the saturation way more than it should be. While the P50 Pro captures a striking shot here, the Pixel's colors are way closer to what your eye actually sees. Still, this is a very competent camera setup overall, and that also extends to video. The P50 Pro's main and ultra-wide cameras have some of the best stabilization I've seen in a phone. It's easily able to smooth out the motion from a brisk walk, and even shooting video while out running, the footage was way smoother than it had any right to be. As for telephoto video, you start to see the limitations of that 3.5 times camera, especially in terms of stabilization, and when you push it up to 10 times, it's noticeably shakier than the king of zoom cameras that is the Galaxy S21 Ultra. So Huawei can still make a great phone camera, but what about the Achilles heel of recent Huawei phones, the software? Well, this device runs EMUI based on Huawei's Harmony OS platform, which runs most Android apps just fine, and over the past year or so, Huawei has built out even more functionality, including NFC payments and its own Pebble maps. Outside of the Huawei app gallery, you're still going to be downloading a significant chunk of your Android apps from Pebble Search, which tracks down APKs from trusted third-party sources, and as before, that's still kind of a hassle, especially when it comes to updating them. Because there's no Google Play services, even if the app installs, some functionality might not work 100% of the time. Case in point, Slack works just fine here, but notifications use Google's Firebase system, so they won't show up on a Huawei phone. Aside from apps, the latest EMUI is a mix of Android and iOS influences. The notification shade and quick settings area is very clearly based on the iPhone. Meanwhile, multitasking, especially the floating window feature, takes after the functionality you'll find on many other phones from Samsung and Oppo. Ultimately, for someone like me who relies on Google services and apps that use things like Firebase, using Harmony OS and EMUI is still kind of a headache, and it's tough to recommend this software experience to anyone who has any kind of Google presence in their digital life. One benefit of Huawei doing its own thing in terms of software though is that it can squeeze a lot more life out of a relatively small battery. The P50 Pro's 4360 mAh cell seems small on paper, but in the few days I've been using it, I've been pretty impressed with the level of longevity that it's given me. You probably won't get multiple days out of this thing, but a full working day is no problem whatsoever. Plus, when it does come time to recharge, the super quick 66-watt supercharging spec can rapidly get you out of the danger zone. Buy Huawei's proprietary wireless charger and you'll also get wireless refills at up to 50 watts. Using the P50 Pro is still a tale of many compromises though. The lack of 5G isn't a big deal today, but it's probably going to make this phone seem quite dated in a few years' time. And if you're expecting all the pain points caused by the lack of Google software to be fixed, well, progress has been made building out Huawei's own ecosystem, but I still found myself missing many of the Google conveniences that you get with a phone like the Pixel. The biggest red flag though might be the price. The P50 Pro retails for €1,199 in the Eurozone, which is perilously close to the reported starting price for the Galaxy S22 Ultra, just €50 away in fact. And this is a phone with last year's processor and no 5G. So while the P50 Pro has a lot of great hardware and is an excellent little photo and video taking machine, the high price and many software quirks compared to a standard Android phone could make it a tough sell. That's it for now. Let us know what you think of the P50 Pro down in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.